Meal times, they can be one of the most stressful parts of the day, right? So in this explainer, we're going to build a therapeutic toolkit together to change that. We want to help transform those battles over food into moments of positive connection.
So, does it hit a little too close to home? If you're a parent or a caregiver, you know that feeling all too well. That constant uphill struggle, just filled with anxiety for you and so much frustration for your child.
Well, first things first, I really want you to hear this. You are so not alone in this. So today, let's just set that stress aside for a bit and focus on what we can do. We're going to put together a really practical toolkit to help create calmer and hopefully more enjoyable meal times for everyone.
All right, let's dive into our toolkit. And the very first tool is all about understanding. It's about looking past that easy label of picky eating and really getting to the bottom of the complex why behind the whole challenge.
And here's the first huge insight. For so many children with autism, refusing a food isn't really about the taste. It's more like a sensory defense mechanism. A food might get rejected simply because its texture is jarring, or its smell is totally overwhelming, or even because the color is just too much visually.
Here's a good way to think about it. Typical picky eating is really about preference. Like, I like chicken nuggets, but I don't like fish. Simple as that. But a sensory-based aversion, that's all about a pattern. It's rejecting an entire category of food, like avoiding anything and everything with a mushy texture, from bananas to mashed potatoes.
Okay, so what do we do with this information? How do we use it? Well, our first tool basically turns us from a frustrated chef into like a sensory detective. We're going to learn to work with these needs, not fight against them.
The whole strategy here is built on two things, observation and adaptation. First, you got to figure out what those sensory triggers actually are. Then you adapt. So if the texture of cooked veggies is the big problem, maybe a smoothie can deliver those same nutrients in a way that feels okay. And look, the whole goal here is gradual, totally pressure-free exposure. And you've got to celebrate every single tiny win along the way.
And this is so important. Patience is everything. The research is really clear on this. Taking the pressure off and creating positive, low-stress experiences is by far the most effective way to help a child accept more foods over time.
All right, time for the second tool in our kit. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit, moving beyond just the sensory side of things and starting to investigate if certain foods themselves could be causing problems.
Yes, sometimes the issue isn't just about how a food feels or smells. It can be physiological. Any discomfort, big shifts in behavior, or stomach troubles after eating, that could be a clue that there's a deeper sensitivity to something like gluten or dairy proteins or even those artificial additives.
And that, of course, leads us to the pretty famous GFCF diet, which just stands for gluten-free, casein-free. It's pretty straightforward. It involves taking all wheat and dairy products out of the diet.
And look, there's a reason you hear about this diet so much. A lot of parents, and some studies too, have reported seeing some really positive changes in behavior, language, and social skills when these foods are removed.
But, and this is a really, really important but, the wider scientific community is pretty clear that the evidence just isn't conclusive yet. It seems like a GFCF diet might be a game changer for some kids, but we definitely need more solid research to understand exactly who it helps and why.
So what's the takeaway here? What do you do? The main thing is, don't just start experimenting on your own. The safest, most effective way to go about this is to team up with a doctor or a pediatric nutritionist. They can guide you through what's called a supervised elimination diet to figure out systematically if specific foods are triggers for your child.
Okay, on to our third and final tool. In this one, it's not even about what's on the plate. It's about everything happening around the plate. This is where we get to harness the incredible power of a good routine.
For any child with autism, the unknown can be a huge source of anxiety. So when you create a mealtime routine that's super predictable, you're building a sense of safety and control. And that, in turn, can just dramatically lower the stress and resistance around eating.
And the great thing is, consistency doesn't have to be complicated at all. It can be as simple as eating at the same time each day in the same quiet spot without the TV blasting in the background. Even just dimming the lights can create a much calmer atmosphere and signal to the brain that this is a safe, predictable time.
But what if your child won't even sit at the table? What then? The key here is to completely rewire the association they have with the table. So instead of pushing for a full meal, start with a super tiny goal, just 1 minute sitting at the table. When they do it, praise them like crazy and end the session. You're slowly teaching their brain that the dinner table is a place of low-pressure success.
Things like a first-then chart, these visual supports are absolute game changers. They are so powerful because they take something abstract, like you need to try your broccoli, and make it super concrete and predictable. It's not a negotiation anymore. It's a clear visual contract. First you do this small thing, then you get this thing you want. It just provides so much structure and removes the anxiety of not knowing what's next.
Okay, so let's just pause for a second and look at what we've built. We've just put together a really powerful 3-part toolkit. And when you use these tools together, you're creating a really comprehensive approach to making mealtimes better.
So let's recap the whole toolkit. First, you become a sensory detective, decoding those specific needs and adapting to them. Second, you team up with a professional to investigate if any food sensitivities are at play. And finally, you wrap all of it in the calming, predictable power of a solid routine.
And maybe the most important thing to take away from all of this is that this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. The goal isn't to have a perfect meal tomorrow. It's about making small, consistent steps that build trust, chip away at anxiety, and eventually lead to big changes over time.
And that really brings us to our final thought for today. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by all the possibilities, just ask yourself this. Out of everything we talked about, what's one small thing you could try tomorrow? Maybe it's just dimming the lights. Or maybe it's drawing up a simple first/then chart. Because that one small step, that's the beginning of a whole new journey.